I always believed my family's silences were louder than their celebrations, but nothing prepared me for the quiet that followed Grandpa's death. My name is Rowan Ashby, 32 years old, half made of coffee and deadlines, living in a rented walk-up above a used bookstore in Brighton, England. For years, I'd kept a polite ocean of distance between myself and the rest of the Ashby clan scattered across the states, convinced that space would dull the sting of their judgments. It only partly worked, yet when Mum called in late March, her voice shaking like a loose pane in a storm window to say Dad's gone, the miles between us collapsed into one breathless heartbeat. Grandpa Charles died on a Tuesday before dawn. He always did prefer stealing away while everyone else slept. That way, he said, no one could fuss. He'd been my compass, my first investor, and my fiercest secret keeper. Through his letters, scrawled in fountain pen loops smelling of cedar cigar boxes, he'd reminded me that life's map rarely tells you where the dragons are. You have to sail anyway. I booked the earliest flight from Heathrow to Boston, heartsick, suitcase half-zipped, laptop still humming with unfinished edits. 3 hours later, Mum called back, tone strangled flat this time, and said there'd be no need. The funeral's already happened. They kept it private. They. A pronoun used like a weapon. She meant my father's siblings, Aunt Coraine, Uncle Benedict, and their adult children who referred to Grandpa's library as the assets. In their world, humility was for people with less than 7 figures, and family loyalty could be traded like stock futures. I hadn't spoken to them since refusing to invest in Benedict's cryptocurrency-flavored pyramid scheme 3 years earlier. I remember gripping the edge of my kitchen counter as Mum told me the service had been that very morning. Tiny, exclusive, invitation only. Not even Grandpa's bridge partners had known. My chest tightened as if someone had welded it shut. Grandpa loved pageantry when it came to the rituals of goodbye. He'd once criticized a friend's memorial for lacking live jazz. A secret burial? That wasn't him. That was them. I pictured the Ashby Mansion in Westbridge, Massachusetts, its white columns rising like accusatory fingers against a slate sky. Somewhere inside, the family would already be discussing who got which antique hunting rifle, which slice of timberland, which shell company. Grandpa's estate was rumored to be worth nearly $50 million. Mostly real estate, vineyard stakes in Napa, patents on an obscure optical sensor, and a portfolio older than disco. Growing up, he made me promise never to measure worth in sterling or dollars, but deep down, he knew the numbers distended people's humanity like a funhouse mirror. When Mum finished speaking, the kettle screamed behind me. I let it. The shriek fit the mood. Then, still shaking, I opened Grandpa's last email. Dated 2 weeks before his death. Subject line, a loose end. Inside, a single sentence. Rowan, if you read this, promise me you'll listen for the quiet places. There where the truth lingers. There was an attachment. A photograph of his rosewood writing desk. Drawer ajar, a brass key glinting in shadow. That key felt suddenly urgent. I changed my ticket rather than cancel it. If they could bury my grandpa without me, I could eulogize him in person, invited or not. Besides, I needed to find that drawer. The estate would be in chaos. People overlook details when greed fogs the air. With luck, the key, or whatever it opened, still waited. Hash. The Atlantic curled beneath the plane, like hammered pewter. I spent 7 sleepless hours drafting mental arguments for every family member I expected to confront. Cormlake would weaponize politeness. Benedict would weaponize volume. My cousin Tyler, slick as oiled marble, would grin like I was late to a board meeting. I knew the choreography, condolences, defensiveness, the eventual pivot to paperwork. At Logan Airport, early spring smelled of thawing salt and exhaust. I rented the cheapest hatchback available, an anemic touring blue thing, whose radio only knew talk shows, and drove toward Westbridge, my hands white-knuckled on the wheel. 2 miles from the estate, traffic thickened behind a sheriff's cruiser, yellow barriers blocked the road, and beyond them, reporters milled like gulls. Cameras snapped as if the pavement were famous. One banner read Ashby Fortune up for grabs, Another, family feud erupts after secret funeral. The car behind me honked. I rolled down the window and signaled to an officer that I belonged to the circus ahead. My passport changed hands. The deputy scanned it, eyes narrowing when he noticed my surname. After a tense minute, he waved me through. I inched along the driveway, flanked by old sugar maples, weeping icy sap. A valet I didn't recognize directed me to park near a side entrance reserved for catering trucks during gala season. Unloading camera gear, maybe? I followed voices inside. The foyer smelled of lilies and furniture polish. Corinne's taste. Expensive and funereal. A cluster of dark-suited men stood by the marble staircase. Lawyers from Whitlock and Green. They spoke in curved, hushed phrases, as if the walls might testify under oath. I spotted Corinne near the grand piano, wearing a navy sheath dress too tailored for grief. She froze mid-sentence when she saw me, lips parting as if tasting something sour. "Rowan," she said, "we weren't expecting you." "Clearly," I replied. Benedict lumbered over, taller than I remembered, stomach straining against a pinstripe jacket. "Thought you were in Europe," he said. "No hug, no handshake, just territorial appraisal." "I caught a flight." Corinne folded her arms. "The service was private. Dad wanted it small." "That's odd," I countered. "He once told me funerals are for the living, not the dead. The living includes me." Tyler appeared, phone in hand, thumb still scrolling. "Hey cousin," he drawled, "you're trending on our internal messaging already." It was like arguing with drapery. I changed tack. "Where's his study?" Corinne's eyes flicked to the lawyers. "Sealed for the reading of the will." "I'd like a moment alone with his things." "That's impossible." The room felt smaller, oxygen siphoned off. I noticed the piano bench drawn away, revealing a faint scrape mark on the parquet, as if something heavy had been moved recently. A safe, maybe? Instinct thrummed. Grandpa's desk was gone. I exhaled through my teeth. Then I'll wait. Across the hall, someone sobbed into a handkerchief. When I turned, I saw my younger sister, Hadley, her cheeks blotched, mascara staining the silk cuff of her blouse. We hadn't spoken since Christmas, when she'd accused me of abandoning the family to play broke poet. She met my gaze, guilt flickering like a blown-out match, then looked away. Hash. Hours blurred into polite standoffs. The lawyers retreated upstairs. Corinne instructed staff to bring tea but not cake. Cakeless hospitality as punishment. I watched the garden from a bay window and remembered Grandpa teaching me the difference between weeds and wildflowers. "One feeds bees," he'd said. "The other feeds boredom." At dusk, I stepped outside for air. The garden paths were still muddy, the fountain dry for winter. I wandered toward a carriage house now used for storage. Its door yawned open, padlock dangling. Inside, dust, tarps, faint motor oil. And in one corner, buried under drop cloths, lay Grandpa's slender rosewood desk. My pulse kicked. I fumbled aside canvas sheets, coughing at the stirred grit, and there it was. The shallow top drawer pictured in the email. Fingers trembling, I tugged it. Locked. Footsteps sounded on gravel behind me. I spun as Hadley entered, hugging her elbows against the chill. "I thought I'd find you here," she whispered. "Why didn't anyone tell me about the funeral?" Her eyes brimmed. "I'm sorry, they said you'd make it about yourself." I laughed. One sharp bark. "I'm standing in a shed, talking to a desk." She inched closer. "Rowan, something's wrong. The will, it's changing." "A week ago, Uncle Tyler," she caught herself, corrected. "Cousin Tyler told Dad there'd be a supplemental codicil, but the lawyers won't show anyone." "Grandpa was meticulous," I said. "He hated last-minute edits." She nodded. "Exactly." Her gaze fell on the desk. "Is that?" "Help me lift it." We maneuvered the desk enough to see the lock plate better. It wasn't the original brass, but a newer electronic cylinder, the kind programmed to accept fobs as well as keys. Red light blinking, battery low. "Do you have the key?" Hadley asked. "Working on it." I pulled my phone, opened Grandpa's photo again. Under the key in the drawer rested a single chess bishop, ebony, matte. Grandpa taught me chess at 6. Bishop was his favorite piece. He called it the quiet one nobody watches. I remembered a travel set he'd kept in the library. Hadley whispered, "The basement." We exchanged a look. The old billiards room where he stored board games. A wave of nostalgia crashed over me. Licorice breath, chalk smell, leather cue cases. Back inside, we slipped through French doors, down creaking stairs into stone-cool air tinged with mildew. Rows of cardboard boxes sat between covered wingback chairs. In a far corner atop a trunk lay the wooden chessboard, brass hinges dulled by time. I pried it open, empty squares, but in the hinge cavity, a single ebony bishop waited as if expecting rescue. Its base felt loose. I twisted gently. The felt bottom popped off, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, a brass key, teeth delicate as lace. Hadley sucked in a breath. "You always were his favorite." The words stung and soothed simultaneously. Footsteps thumped overhead. Multiple people. Voices called my name. The basement lights flared on, harsh. Hadley blinked. "They know." We ran. Scrambling back toward the carriage house, my lungs burning, we rounded the hydrangea hedge and froze. Corinne, Benedict, Tyler, and 2 lawyers blocked the path, silhouettes against the pallid moon. Benedict's hand rested inside his jacket like a politician's pledge. I wondered if he carried the .38 Grandpa once used for target practice. Tyler stepped forward, eyes glittering. "Family meeting," he said. "Hand over what you took." My fingers tightened around the bishop, now hidden in my pocket. I felt the key's edges pressing against my palm. Corinne's voice softened unnaturally. "Rowan, darling, you don't understand the complexities here. Dad changed his plans in the final week. It's delicate." I thought of Grandpa's last email. Listen for the quiet places. Behind them, the night thrummed with frog song and the faint hum of electric fences along the vineyard. The quiet told me their urgency wasn't grief. They were scared. "What's in that desk?" Tyler demanded. "I don't know," I answered truthfully, "but you must, or you wouldn't be standing between me and it." Benedict sighed, as if disappointed but resigned. "We can do this nicely," he rumbled, "or we can have security escort you off the property." "You mean drag me past the reporters?" I asked. "They'd love footage of a family brawl at a billionaire's wake." A muscle twitched in Corinne's jaw. Suddenly, an alarm pierced the night. Shrill, urgent. Everyone turned as floodlights exploded across the driveway. A second later, a black van barreled through the gates, tires crunching gravel, side emblazoned with the logo of a local news network. Reporters spilled out, microphones raised, cameras blinded like gun flashes. The family surged toward them, shouting for privacy, buying me seconds. I bolted. Inside the carriage house again, heart banging, I jammed the key into the drawer lock. It caught, clicked, drawer slid open with a sigh. Inside lay a stack of envelopes bound with twine, a small leather journal, and a single flash drive taped beneath a handwritten note. For Rowan, if they forget the sound of footsteps. I stuffed everything into my messenger bag. As I turned, the doorway filled with Tyler's silhouette, blocking moonlight. He held something in his right hand, glinting metal. "Put the bag down," he said, voice flat. "Now." My pulse thundered. Behind him, a second figure advanced. Corinne. I gripped the bag strap. Somewhere deep in the house, the alarm still screamed, sirens layering in the distance. In the shadows, Tyler's object resolved into a stun gun. He thumbed the trigger. Blue arcs crackled. I weighed my chances. Dash past him or bluff. Hadley might call police. Reporters could still be outside. But electricity is faster than hope. Tyler stepped forward, eyes reflecting the crackle. The world shrank to 2 choices and 1 heartbeat. Before the arc could leap, a booming voice echoed from the courtyard, through loudspeakers, one of the TV anchors shouting, "Sources say a surprise heir may change everything." Tyler hesitated, glancing over his shoulder. I moved. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you." I could still feel the cabin pressure humming in my ears when the immigration officer at Logan stamped my passport with an indifferent thunk, as though all the turbulence that had tumbled my insides meant nothing to Boston's night shift bureaucracy. My suitcase, the same battered carry-on that had followed me across gap-year hostels and regattas of failed freelance gigs, wobbled behind me like a reluctant child as I stepped onto the linoleum arrivals floor. 12 hours earlier, I'd been pacing my Brighton flat, rereading Aunt Claudia's curt email. Your presence is unnecessary at the memorial service. Family wishes privacy. They hadn't even typed Grandpa's full name. No Henrik Ashby, no beloved patriarch. Just a digital doormat slammed in my face. Yet by some cosmic bookkeeping error, or more likely Grandpa's own stubborn foresight, the family lawyer, S. Howard Marlowe, had addressed the formal summons for the will reading directly to me, certified and demanding a signature. That single envelope had hit my mailbox like a gauntlet thrown. So here I was, jet-lagged, undercaffeinated, and exactly where my relatives least wanted me, the front lines of the Ashby inheritance saga. Outside, a damp January wind slapped color back into my cheeks. Boston smelled of sea salt and diesel, like Brighton's grittier cousin. I hailed a ride-share, ignoring the driver's raised eyebrow at my only luggage, a cabin bag and a leather backpack. Visiting family, I offered. He grunted, tapping the GPS as though that answered everything. The ride north. Fairhaven Estate technically lay in Marblehead, a coastal town where clapboard mansions perched like vigilant gulls on granite ledges. Grandpa had bought the property in 1976 after selling his third pharmaceutical startup. Local lore claimed he'd outbid a shipping magnate by wiring full payment within 43 minutes of touring the house. Typical Henrik Ashby. If he wanted something, he wanted it yesterday. As we crossed the Tobin Bridge, city lights melted into the inky Charles River below. I opened Grandpa's last voicemail on my phone, just static and a sigh, but couldn't press play. Instead, I reread the itinerary Mr. Marlowe's office had emailed. Greater than January 11th, 10:00 a.m. ***. Formal reading of the last will and testament of Henrik J. Ashby, Esquire. Greater than Comedy location ***, Fairhaven Manor, Marblehead, MA. Greater than Comedy locating detendants mandatory *** for all direct descendants and controlling shareholders. Shareholders. That single word prickled my skin. Grandpa had always blurred the line between family and corporation, love and leverage. Arrival. The Uber turned onto a private lane tunneled by ancient oaks. Fairhaven's facade emerged, floodlit against the gray Atlantic, its Georgian symmetry too stern to feel welcoming. Snow flurried sideways under the security lamps. I paid the driver and shouldered my backpack. No one greeted me at the porte cochere. I rang the brass bell. Echoes pondered in the foyer until, finally, the door opened a hesitant inch. My cousin Bennett, tall, ginger-beard, trimmed with accountant precision, blinked at me like he'd seen a ghost of Christmas liabilities. Rowan? You weren't. I mean, we thought you were in Europe. His voice cracked. Brighton Keys in Europe, last I checked. I stepped inside, brushing sleet from my coat. Warmth smelled of sandalwood polish and old money. Bennett sputtered. Yes, but Claudia said... Claudia says many things. I set my suitcase by the staircase. Where's Auntie now? Boardroom, he muttered, gesturing toward the east wing. They're, setting up for tomorrow. Setting up. Dodgor. As though Grandpa's legacy were a PowerPoint presentation. Notes the boardroom confrontation. I found them clustered around Grandpa's 20-foot mahogany table, Aunt Claudia in her signature cream cashmere, Cousin Savannah scrolling a tablet, Uncle Reese whispering to his attorney. At the head sat a silver urn, Grandpa himself, reduced to ashes and placed like a silent quorum chair. Conversation died as I entered. Rowan, Claudia said, voice icy, we didn't expect you. Clearly, I clasped my hands to hide their tremor, yet here I am. The will requires my presence. Savannah flipped her platinum hair. Email said service was private. Thought you'd respect that. Funny, you reserve respect for invitations, not cremations. I met her gaze. She looked away first. Uncle Reese's attorney cleared his throat. Ms. Ashby, Arrangements are finalized. There is no lodging available on the estate. I'll stay in Grandpa's study. The words surprised even me, but a flicker of something, approval, seemed to stir the shadows behind the urn. Claudia's nostrils flared. That wing is sealed. Unseal it. I brushed past them, lifting the antique leverage key from its hook. Grandpa had once taught me the lock's weight, saying a door that easy to open isn't worth guarding. Sighing Stom night in the study. By midnight, the house slept under a hush of forced civility. I navigated halls lined with maritime oil paintings until I reached the study. Cedar panels, vaulted ceiling, and the scent of pipe tobacco that still lingered like ghost breath. I lit the desk lamp. Dust motes danced. Everywhere, glass cabinets of navigation instruments and chemistry sets, reminders of Grandpa's dual passions, discovery and direction. On the desk lay a leather-bound journal. Tucked beneath it, a sealed envelope bore my name in Grandpa's angular hand. For Rowan. Open when you're ready to lead. My pulse stumbled. I didn't open it. Instead, I sank into the armchair and let the Atlantic roar mingle with the grandfather clock's ticks, until jet lag and sorrow pulled me under. Syme Starro Morning Revelations. I woke to knuckles rapping. Sunlight fanned through half-drawn drapes. Mr. Marlowe, the lawyer, stood in the doorway, pausing to remove snow from his Homburg. His mustache twitched at my makeshift bed of blankets. Ms. Ashby, 10 minutes. I'll be there, I said, throat rough. Downstairs, relatives assembled like investors awaiting quarterly dividends. Mr. Marlowe placed a metal briefcase on the table, entered a code, and produced the will, thick, embossed. Per Mr. Ashby's instructions, he began, this document supersedes all prior versions. Be advised, any absence from today's proceedings constitutes legal forfeiture of inheritance, unless expressly waived by the executor. Murmurs rippled. He read clauses about art trusts, charitable foundations, scholarship funds. My cousins shifted, calculating percentages. Then Marlowe reached the heart. To my granddaughter, Rowan Elspeth Ashby, I bequeath controlling interest, 61%, in Ashby Biopharma Holdings, plus liquid assets amounting to $50 million, contingent upon her acceptance of primary executorship. Asterisk. Aunt Claudia gasped as though she'd swallowed a shard of crystal. Furthermore, Marlowe continued, should any beneficiary act to exclude or undermine Rowan's rightful participation, their share shall be transferred to the Ashby Relief Endowment. His gaze swept the room deliberately. Silence broke into a frenzy, voices overlapping above the Atlantic surf. Claudia protested, Savannah cried. Bennett cursed politely under his breath. I could only hear Grandpa's voice in memory. Don't wait for a seat at their table, R.O. Build your own. My fingers found the envelope in my pocket. Tuftan Stoperneuer Pride, Stocks Aftermath. The meeting adjourned with threats of contestation. Claudia's lawyer whispered about undue influence, while Reese eyed me like a chess opponent down a queen. Outside the boardroom, Marlowe stopped me. Your grandfather anticipated turmoil, he said. He instructed me to deliver this. He handed me a small brass key, engraved with the number ***17. 17 what? I asked. Ask the Hawthorne, he replied cryptically, adjusting his hat. Typical lawyer riddles. I retreated to the study, closing the door on distant arguments. Heart-hammering, I opened Grandpa's envelope. Inside lay a single sheet. Greater thing Rowan. Greater than. If you're reading this, the vultures have begun their circle. Remember, legacy is not what you inherit. It's what you defend. The family will test your spine. Let them feel steel. Greater than the next chapter starts, where my first fortune nearly ended. Use the key. Unearth the truth beneath the Hawthorne tonight at 11:17 p.m. Trust no one who fears the dark. Greater than all my love. Greater than H.A. I sat back, the Atlantic echoing the drum of my pulse. Beneath the Hawthorne, the old tree on the cliff path, where Grandpa first taught me the difference between adventure and risk. Evening preparations. Twilight found me slipping into boots, pocketing a flashlight and the brass key. House lights glowed behind frosted panes as I stepped onto the blustery terrace. In the distance, a single hawthorn tree leaned against the wind like a stubborn sentinel. Crunching over snow, I replayed every childhood memory, searching for clues. Grandpa used to bury time capsules, matchbox cars, broken compasses, only to dig them up years later and laugh at our wide-eyed wonder. Halfway to the tree, footsteps scuffed behind me. I spun, breath clouding. Bennett. Rowan, wait! He jogged over, hands raised. We need to talk. About what? The coup you're planning? I kept walking. I didn't know about the funeral exclusion, he said, tone surprisingly earnest. Claudia orchestrated that. She wanted you out so shares wouldn't dilute. I'm done being her pawn. I slowed. Snowflakes blurred the world in silver static. Let me help, he urged. Whatever Grandpa hid, he meant for you to have. But you shouldn't go alone. His breath came in misted puffs. Trust no one who fears the dark. Meet me here at 11, I said. If you're sincere, prove it. I left him staring after me, indecision etched in hard-set shoulders. Asterisk 11:17 p.m. The hawthorn's twisted branches writhed against a starless sky as I knelt by its base. My flashlight beam caught fresh scratches in the bark. Numbers. Asterisk 17. The wind moaned, salt and snow mingling. I brushed aside snow until shovel-ready earth appeared. Cold bit my fingers as I dug with a trowel from Grandpa's gardening shed. 5 inches down, metal clinked. I unearthed a small steel box, keyhole stamped asterisk 17. Behind me, a branch snapped. I froze. Bennett? I whispered. No answer, only the ocean's relentless hush. I fitted the brass key. It turned with an ominous click. Hinges groaned open, revealing a packet of documents and a black USB drive. Headlights flared up the path. An SUV accelerating, tires crunching snow. Panic jolted through me. I stuffed the contents into my coat and kicked soil back over the hole. The SUV skidded to a stop. Doors slammed. Claudia's voice sliced the wind. Rowan, step away from that tree! She advanced, flanked by Reese and Savannah, their silhouettes stark in the beams. Bennett trailed behind, expression unreadable. Hand over what you found, Claudia commanded. Grandpa didn't leave it to asterisk you. I backed toward the cliff edge, icy shale crumbling underfoot. Savannah produced a phone. We'll call the police. Grave desecration is a felony. It's soil, not a grave. I tightened my grip on the box. Reese took a step. Come inside, Rowan, let's be sensible. Wind howled, flinging snow like glass shards. My heel slipped closer to the precipice. Bennett's eyes met mine. A silent apology? His lips moved, lost in the gale. Then, without warning, Claudia lunged. Everything erupted. I pivoted, boots skidding. Her hand snagged my coat, tearing fabric. The USB drive slipped, glinting briefly before tumbling into darkness beyond the cliff. I screamed, a raw sound the ocean swallowed as my balance pitched forward. Slate stones gave way beneath me. The last thing I saw was Bennett diving, arm outstretched, and horror splintering his features. The world inverted, night sky and frothing Atlantic traded places. I plunged over the edge, cold air ripping the breath from my lungs. And then, time impact. Everything went white. Floor of Terminal E. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead in arrhythmic pulses that made every traveler look a shade queasier than their jet lag alone deserved. My legs felt like damp newsprint, wobbly, ready to tear, after the 7-hour transatlantic haul. But the bigger weight pressing on me was the unsent text, still sitting stubbornly unsent on my phone's cracked screen. Mom told me not to come. She had written the words as casually as someone refusing a dinner invite. No need to fly in, Rowan. We've got the arrangements handled here. Focus on your work. Work? The consultancy contract in Brighton had collapsed 3 months earlier. and I'd been eking out a living ghostwriting marketing blurbs for artisanal soap makers. Mom's message wasn't a logistical courtesy. It was a silent padlock on my place in the family's grieving rituals. Yet, I pictured Grandpa's cedar box lowering into the Massachusetts earth without me, and felt a hollow so deep I nearly booked the next flight back across the Atlantic. Instead, I pressed the little blue arrow and sent my only reply, "Too late, I'm here." I aimed my suitcase toward the sliding glass doors and the taxi queue beyond, but even the automatic sensors hesitated to open for me, like Boston itself was deciding if I was welcome. The early March wind barreled inside, tasting of brine and old snow. I zipped my leather jacket higher and pulled Grandpa's wool flat cap, the only thing of his I owned, over my ears. Out on the curb, yellow cabs idled in a slushy line. I gave the driver an address that felt like a dare, Ashby House, Ipswich. He raised an eyebrow at my British accent but said nothing, punching the destination into his dash GPS. 2 hours north, assuming the traffic gods showed mercy. They didn't. We crawled along the I-95 like a snail parade, boxed in by semis. My phone, set stubbornly to UK time, said it was nearly dawn, but the Massachusetts sun was already tipping behind a slate of clouds. Through the smeared passenger window, I caught staccato glimpses of pine stands, strip malls, and once, a glimpse of the Atlantic flexing silver in a break between warehouses. Each new mile erased another argument for turning back. Sometime outside Danvers, the cab's radio crackled with a talk show caller complaining about inheritance tax loopholes. I jabbed the power button, plunging the cabin into acoustic vacuum. The silence rolled out like fresh asphalt, but the subject stayed lodged behind my ribs. $50 million. That was the figure Gary Rutherford, Grandpa's attorney, had floated in a curt email labeled probate. If rumors hold, the estate is worth in the region of $50 million USD. There will be a reading of the will at 10 a.m. Monday in Salem, as though I needed an incentive beyond grief to book a flight. Grandpa never talked numbers. He talked stories. How he hitchhiked across Canada with $5 and a wrench set. How he fixed diesel engines in Arctic research stations. How he used the first dividend from Ashby Maritime Solutions to buy Grammy a red canoe. But numbers? He let them sit silent behind the doors of his study, trusting compound interest and well-paid managers. Mom, on the other hand, treated the estate like a promised land with border controls. My cousins Carson and Lydia referred to it plainly as the pot. They'd been counting the lads since freshman year of business school, leaning across picnic tables at 4th of July gatherings to whisper valuations. I'd rolled my eyes so hard I nearly sprained an optic nerve. When the cab finally nosed onto the gravel drive of Ashby House, twilight was bruising the sky. The old Georgian-style manor crouched at the top of a hill, 3 stories of weather-beaten brick and white shuttered windows like rows of judgmental eyes. Grandpa's flagpole in the front yard flew no flag now, just an empty rope clinking in the wind. I paid the driver, adding a tip generous enough to offset my stress, and dragged my suitcase toward the columned porch. Porch lights glowed amber, but no silhouettes moved behind the glass. I raised a hand to knock, then reminded myself I didn't owe entry permission to a house my ancestors built. The door wasn't locked. The entry hall smelled of lemon wax and lilies. The kind of lilies that funeral homes ordered by the crate. Their sweetness stuck to the back of my throat, making me swallow twice before I called out, "Mom?" Footsteps tapped quick on hardwood overhead, then descended the central staircase. My mother, Colette Ashby, appeared in a black sheath dress, every auburn hair pinned to obedient perfection. She looked like a magazine editor, not a grieving daughter. Her expression hovered between surprise and disapproval. "Rowan, you should have told me you were coming." I exhaled through my nose to hide a shaky laugh. "And ruin the awkward reveal? Never!" She reached the bottom step and smoothed an invisible wrinkle in her dress. "The service was yesterday morning. We," she paused, choosing a verb plausible to polite company, "didn't expect you." "I know. I saw the live stream archive on the church website." I hadn't planned to say that, but the words tumbled out iced with fatigue and salt. "You held your father's funeral like a webcast product launch." Mom's shoulders pinched inward, Everyone's scattered these days, R.O. It was the only way to include distant friends. Except his family. We stood 5 feet apart, the foyer chandelier humming above like a distant beehive. Somewhere deeper in the house, a heater clicked on, exhaling warmth none of us deserved. Mom broke first. You must be exhausted. Your room is made up. Yes, we kept it. Top of the west staircase. I nodded, throat bobbing, and hauled my suitcase up 23 steps that once seemed a mountain at age 9. The hallway carpet, antique Persian, muffled my footfalls. At the door to my room, I hesitated. Childhood smelled like dust and lavender sachets. I pushed in. Everything had shrunk. The iron bed frame that once loomed cathedral high now looked suitable for a dollhouse. Framed photographs still populated the dresser. My first sailing lesson with Grandpa, my high school science fair ribbon, that blurry Polaroid where Grammy caught me reading under a blanket. I traced a fingertip over the glass of the sailing photo until a tear made the varnish shine. Mom's voice drifted from the hall. Dinner in an hour. Your aunts are here. Perfect. The dining room ran on tradition. Linen tablecloth, crystal stemware that felt embarrassed by water, and more candles than electric light. My aunts, Veronica and Susan, flanked either side of Mom like backup singers dressed in department store mourning. Opposite them sat my cousins Carson and Lydia, each scrolling phones beneath the lip of the table. No place had been set for me. I fetched a china plate from the sideboard and slid into the last chair. 6 sets of eyes darted up, some startled, others calculating. "Rowan," Aunt Veronica finally said, voice syrupy, "we didn't realize you'd be attending the aftergathering." Neither did Mom. I forked a roasted carrot with more force than necessary. Carson pocketed his phone and tried for humor. "Long flight for nothing, cuz. The will's airtight. Grandpa loved us all equally." "Equity isn't always equal," I replied, mirroring Mom's old lecture tone. Lydia blew on her soup. "Gary's reading is a formality. 2 trusts split among direct descendants. That's us." "Direct descendants includes me," I said. "No," Mom interjected. "You're a descendant, but you're not involved in the business. Grandpa's wishes were specific to those continuing his legacy." The soup spoon paused at my lips. "Legacy? I'm an environmental engineer, Mom. Keeping oceans clean? Is that not adjacent to Ashby Maritime's freight routes?" Her gaze skated away. Carson laughed. "She's got a point." He earned a swift kick from Lydia. I knew the choreography from childhood under-table wars. Dinner sagged under the weight of withheld rebuttals. The candles tunneled deeper into themselves. When plates cleared, Mom announced early bedtime. "The attorney arrives at 8 tomorrow for preliminary signatures." I swallowed the last of my bitter coffee. Perfect. I'll be there. Night in Ipswich smelled of dock rot and pine bark. I lay in my tiny bed, listening to the Atlantic flex its lungs somewhere beyond the dark tree line. Grandpa used to say you could tell a storm's distance by counting the seconds between wave crashes. But the sea tonight was a metronome, steady, patient. I couldn't sleep. I opened Grandpa's cap on my lap, fingertips mapping the worn tweed like braille. Something crinkled inside the lining. My heart stuttered. I grew up stuffing secret notes into this hat for Grandpa to find. But I'd forgotten about the hidden inner pocket. I peeled back the seam and pinched out a photo negative. Just one frame, the edges brittle. Holding it toward the window, I made out silhouettes. 2 men on a dock beside a shipping container, one passing a briefcase to the other. Under the negative, in Grandpa's spidery handwriting, I read, "If I'm gone too soon, follow the cargo, RMS Helios." Gone too soon? He was 91. I scanned the timestamp scrawled in the corner. 2007. The year Grandpa abruptly resigned as CEO, citing, quote, health reasons. The year Grammy had found him pacing the study at 3 a.m., whispering about debts owed to dangerous people. The floorboards creaked in the hallway. I stuffed the negative back into the cap and slid both under my pillow just as my bedroom door opened a crack. Mom's whisper, "Rowan, are you awake?" I steadied my breathing. Yeah. She stepped inside, moonlight slicing her silhouette into silver edges. "I know today was tense, but the will tomorrow, it might surprise you." My palms dampened. Should I be scared? She perched on the mattress like we were reenacting bedtime stories. Just be open-minded. Dad had reasons. You'll understand soon. I thought of the photo and its cryptic order. I hope so. Mom brushed hair from my brow, tenderness cutting through our usual stalemate. Get some rest. Big day. She rose and paused at the doorway. Love you, R.O. She hadn't said that since my college graduation. I whispered the words back, but they felt like paper in my mouth. I dreamt of waves lapping against a steel hull of a briefcase sinking through dark water, latches popping open to release swirling pages that grew teeth. When I jolted awake, dawn smudged the sky pearly gray. Downstairs, the dining room table had been rearranged into a conference setting, legal pads, fountain pens, and a carafe of coffee so strong the fumes alone could unglue wallpaper. Gary Rutherford stood at the head, his gray mustache trimmed into the Morse code of a meticulous man. He nodded when I entered. Miss Ashby, good you could make it. I murmured a greeting and took a seat beside Carson, who flashed a grin like a game show hostess. Lydia whispered something to him that sounded like, play nice. Mom, my aunts, and 2 other cousins filled out the circle. Gary cleared his throat. Your father's testament comprises 3 instruments, a revocable living trust, a testamentary trust, and a letter of wishes. Pens poised over paper, as though note-taking might earn extra shares. First, Gary continued, the living trust transfers full control of Ashby Maritime Solutions, including all voting shares, to a single beneficiary, Rowan M. Ashby. My pen rolled off the table. Silence detonated in the room. Then a simultaneous volley. That can't be right. She's never even... I worked in the company 10 years. Gary raised a calming hand. Rowan was selected for her expertise in sustainable logistics, fulfilling Mr. Ashby's goal to shift the company toward green shipping lanes. Carson shot to his feet. I'm the COO. Gary adjusted his glasses, unruffled. You remain employed at the board's pleasure, Mr. Ashby, but control sits with the trustee. That would be me. I forced a breath through my teeth. There must be clauses, oversight committees, something. There are safeguards, Gary agreed, but ultimate authority is yours. He turned a page. Next, the testamentary trust divides liquid assets, our estimated $50 million, equally among Veronica, Susan, Colette, Carson, and Lydia, contingent upon unanimous board approval for any acquisitions exceeding 20% of revenue. I heard only one thing. They needed my vote. Carson's face mottled purple. Lydia pressed a calming hand on his arm, but her own pulse jumped at her throat. Gary then lifted a single sealed envelope, smaller than the rest. Finally, the letter of wishes addressed solely to Rowan. Per Mr. Ashby's request, it is to be opened privately. All eyes swiveled to me, my stomach plummeted as though the Atlantic had opened beneath my chair. Gary placed the envelope before me. We can recess for 15 minutes. He ushered the bewildered family into the hall. The door clicked shut, trapping me in the still fluttering echo of my own heartbeat. I stared at the envelope. Its flap bore Grandpa's wax seal, a ship's wheel, and my name in fountain pen script. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Rowan, if you're reading this, I've sailed on ahead. I know the helm I hand you feels too large, but you're the only one who sees beyond the horizon line. The others look at the ledger. You watch the tide. But there's something you must know. Helios was no mere ship. It was cargo I never logged, cargo men would kill for. Find the manifest, and you'll find the truth about our fortune. Only then can you steer us clean. Trust no one, not even those who share your blood, until you hold that manifest in your hand. All my love, Grandpa. A floorboard creaked outside. I slid the letter into my jacket just as the door opened. Carson's head poked in. Everything okay? I nodded slowly. Fine. He stepped closer, voice low. Look, R.O., this must be overwhelming. If you sign a proxy, temporary, of course, the board can keep things stable while you settle in. I smoothed my face into polite blankness. I'll consider it, quote. Carson flashed a shark's grin. Great, let's grab lunch after this, talk it through. Sure, I lied. The meeting reconvened. Signatures flowed, but my mind stayed pinned to one word: Helios. After the paperwork, I retreated to Grandpa's study, a mahogany cavern smelling of tobacco ghosts. Shelves groaned under maritime law tomes and world atlases annotated in Grandpa's tidy scrawl. At the center, his antique roll-top desk, locked. I rummaged for a key until dusk blurred the windows purple. Finally, behind a framed nautical chart, I found a small brass key. The lock thunked open. Inside lay folders, ledgers, and, beneath them, a leather-bound captain's log embossed with Helios. I opened to the first page. A list of coordinates, dates, and cryptic symbols, triangles, circles, crossed anchors. The latest entry, the 19th of July, 2007, Boston Harbor, anchor symbol. 19 July, exactly 18 years ago yesterday. Before I could parse further, the desk lamp flickered, then died. The house lost power. Darkness swallowed the study. I groped for my phone just as the window shattered behind me, glass exploding inward. A gloved hand snatched the log from my grip. I lunged, catching only the edge of a sleeve as the intruder vaulted back through the broken pane onto the balcony. Moonlight revealed a black hood. Stop! I scrambled over the desk and out the window, feet landing on crunching shards. The thief sprinted along the balcony, leapt the railing, and disappeared into the shadows of the garden hedge maze. I raced after, heart hammering. The garden smelled of damp loam and crushed lily stems. Twisting paths forked under stone arches, each corner pooling darkness, thick as ink. My breath plumed white in the sudden cold. "Give it back!" I shouted, voice ragged. No answer, just the rustle of hedges. I rounded a bend and slammed into a dead end. Hedge wall 10 feet high. Footprints in the soil ended here, but no body. I pressed shaking hands against the evergreens, searching for gaps, secret doors, anything. Nothing. A distant siren wailed from the main road. I sank to my knees, the scent of pine sap clawing my nostrils. Tears blurred the stars overhead. Behind me, a twig snapped. I spun, fists raised. Nobody. But pinned to the hedge with Grandpa's ship's wheel letter opener was a single Polaroid, still developing in the moonlight. It showed me, headlights illuminating my startled face, taken seconds ago. Across the bottom, in thick black marker, someone had written, "Next time, we take more than the book." My lungs seized. Footsteps approached down the garden path, several sets. Flashlights bobbed, voices calling my name. Carson, Lydia, Mom. I crumpled the Polaroid into my pocket just before they arrived. Their lights splashed over me like accusations. "Rowan!" Mom knelt, grabbing my shoulders. "What happened? We heard glass break." I opened my mouth, but no sound. My gaze darted to Carson, whose brow knitted in performative concern, to Lydia, clutching her phone. The screen reflected the Polaroid's blank twin in her eyes. I realized Gary's warning echoed Grandpa's. Trust no one, not even those who share your blood. Lightning groaned across the sky, silent yet searing. Thunder would arrive in 5-4. But the true storm was already here, and its first strike had taken Grandpa's secret and wrapped it in darkness. Mom squeezed my arm. "Rowan, talk to me." I swallowed, tasting iron. Someone's after the estate, and they just declared war. The garden lights flickered to life then, revealing something we'd all missed. Muddy footprints leading back toward the house, not away. The intruder hadn't come from outside, they had walked out. From inside. And they could still be here. I rose, eyes scanning the mansion's dozens of glowing windows. One curtain fluttered on the third floor, then stilled. Carson followed my gaze, face paling. The house wasn't just mourning. It was haunted by the living. I took a step toward the door, adrenaline boiling my veins. Behind me, thunder finally cracked, ripping the night in two, and the power died again. Everything plunged back into darkness. The wooden floorboards in Grandpa's study creaked, as though they still remembered his weight, each protest a muted warning that I wasn't supposed to be here. Not yet. Not while the estate executor was stuck in traffic and the rest of the Ashby brood chased caterers through the garden, adjourning their celebration of life. But I had exactly 50 minutes before the attorney arrived, and 50 years of secrets seemed to be packed into the mahogany cabinets lining the walls like sentinels. I closed the door behind me with a deliberate softness that barely whispered against the brass latch. Thin stripes of late-afternoon sunlight slanted through dust-webbed blinds, stippling the Persian rug in gold patterns that shifted when I moved. My breath felt too loud. My pulse beat in places I'd never noticed inside my own body, like knuckles and earlobes. The air smelled of cedar, old books, and faint cigar smoke. Scents I had almost forgotten, but that instantly draped me in childhood memories of evenings spent curled at Grandpa's feet while he read me Poe and Stevenson. I hadn't meant to break away from the family's pre-reading luncheon, but seeing my mother laughing beside Uncle Brent as if they'd earned their happiness scraped something raw inside me. Grandpa's absence hung over the gathering like a phantom, yet they had dressed the occasion in linen napkins and mid-priced Chardonnay the way they once refurbished an argument with forced politeness. They spoke of the hefty charitable foundation they planned to establish, never mind that Grandpa's will had not yet been announced. Every remark was a calculated lay in the groundwork of public goodwill, each smile a poker chip. "Rowan, darling," Mom had said, her voice buttered with condescension, "don't wander too far. We'll start the reading as soon as Mr. Gale arrives." But I had wandered, propelled by a question burning hotter than my frustration. Why had Grandpa left me that voicemail the night before he died? And why did Mom delete it from the shared family cloud? I'd only recovered it because my phone cached the audio locally. The message had been cryptic. Just 7 words. "Key is where you first lost hope." He'd ended with an uncharacteristic tremor in his breath, as though he knew someone might be listening. I drew a calming breath and crossed the room to the high-back chair that still bore the indentation of his shoulders. Its burgundy leather was cracked at the edges. The color darkened where his palms once rested while he pondered stock tickers and shipping routes that stretched from Boston to Belize. I brushed the worn armrest with my fingertips, then crouched to see if anything was taped beneath the seat. Nothing. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 3 soft notes, reminding me that time was marching toward me with the steady confidence of a bailiff. I stepped to the desk. An antique partner's desk of quarter-sawn oak so wide 2 people could sit opposite each other without touching, searching for a hint, a loose drawer, a false back. Yet every surface looked exactly how Grandpa had kept it, even down to the pewter pen tray arranged like railroad tracks toward an abyss of blank paper. I tried the center drawer first. Locked. My breath fogged against the brass pull as I leaned closer, noticing the tiniest scratch by the lock plate. Grandpa had never been careless with his furniture. If there was a mar, it had meaning. I traced it with the pad of my thumb. The line wasn't random, but shaped like a tiny arrow pointing left. I followed the implied direction to the shallow side drawer above the row of file compartments. It slid open smoothly, revealing a leather-bound notebook and a tarnished fountain pen. The notebook's pages were dense with Grandpa's looping cursive, each entry dated meticulously. I flipped to the final page. Instead of words, there was a pressed forget-me-not, taped over a hand-drawn sketch of a lighthouse, and beneath it, a single sentence. "In the keeper's darkest night, northeast wind reveals the door." Goosebumps rippled along my arms. Grandpa was turning his study into a treasure map. A gust of laughter from downstairs rattled the crystal chandelier, shattering my concentration. I had maybe 35 minutes left. I tucked the notebook under one arm and paced to the bay window. The Ashby estate sprawled over 6 acres of manicured lawn that sloped down toward a boathouse, and, farther still, a lonely strip of rocky shoreline where an old lighthouse, abandoned since the 60s, stood watch at the mouth of Haverford Cove. Grandpa had bought the lighthouse in the 90s, intending to restore it, but the project stalled after he and Dad argued over cost overruns. Dad died 2 years later, and Grandpa never spoke of the lighthouse again. Now the clue's mention of a northeast wind felt less poetic and more like coordinates. I glanced at the study's compass rose embossed into the rug's corner. Northeast. From the house, A direct line toward the lighthouse meant crossing the orchard and the tidal pools. An easy jog if I left immediately, but leaving now risked being seen. Footsteps sounded on the landing outside the study. Panic prickled my spine. I pocketed the notebook and slipped behind the heavy drapes just as the door handle rattled. "Thought I saw her come up here," whispered a voice. "My cousin Abigail's." Fabric rustled. She was likely adjusting her designer shawl to make it look as though she belonged in this room. "Why's she snooping?" said another. Brunt's youngest, Mason, the cousin who had once dissected my teddy bear because he wanted to see if Courage had stuffing. Their footsteps circled the desk. I held my breath, grateful that the drapes brushed the floor so thickly they concealed my ankles. Mason jiggled the center drawer. "Locked, and we don't have the key." "We will after Gail reads the will," Abigail hissed. "Grandpa left the house to Mom, don't worry." "Rowan's getting nothing. She was persona non grata at the funeral, remember?" Their confidence made my stomach knot, but that same arrogance convinced them to leave after a minute, still bickering about who would get Grandpa's vintage Mustang. I listened until their footfalls faded, then eased out. I had 28 minutes. I slid the side drawer shut and turned to the bookcase looming opposite the desk. Grandpa claimed, at an Ashby Easter brunch, that every shelf told a lie to protect a truth. I ran a hand along the spines of Dickens, Melville, and Hawthorne before settling on Moby Dick, a novel Grandpa loved because obsession always demands a toll. I tugged it. The book tilted outward with an audible click, and part of the case swung on a hidden hinge. A small cavity gaped behind, a safe. Old-fashioned. Combination dial with a brass lever. I suppressed a grin. Grandpa was practically daring me. The lighthouse drawing in the notebook resurfaced in my mind. Could the combination be a set of coordinates? Haverford Lighthouse's latitude and longitude were 42.3712 degrees north, 70.9909 degrees west. The local library's microfiche had burned those numbers into my brain during a 6th grade project. I spun the dial, 423712. Click. Then 709909. The lever resisted, then yielded with a soft clunk. Inside lay a velvet bag, navy blue tied with red twine, and beneath it a narrow metal key with a white tag reading "Ashore." I loosed the twine. A ring spilled into my palm, a plain band of brushed titanium engraved inside with coordinates identical to the lighthouse's. It was cold, heavier than its size implied, as though it carried not just metal but intention. The grandfather clock struck another chime. 4. Time was slipping. I stashed the ring, the key, and the notebook into my crossbody satchel and spun the dial to lock the safe. Then, after a final glance at Grandpa's chair, I slipped into the hall. Downstairs, the house bustled with clinking glasses and forced camaraderie. I could not risk the main staircase. Instead, I took the servants' stairs, a narrow, steep flight that spilled into the mudroom. My shoes slipped on the smooth wood, but I recovered. Adrenaline adhesive to focus. When I emerged onto the back patio, fresh salt air slapped my cheeks. Clouds gathered low over the bay, the northeast wind already picking up as though summoned by the cryptic note. I crossed the lawn in long strides, ducked behind a row of hydrangeas, and sprinted toward the orchard shadows. Branches clawed at my jacket. Damp grass soaked my boots, but exhilaration drowned discomfort. At the orchard's far edge, the land dipped into rough scrub before meeting the rocky path that wound along the cove. Waves crashed below, their rhythm syncopated with my racing heart. The lighthouse rose ahead, a dark taper against a darkening sky, its lens long shattered by storms and neglect. I reached the security fence. Chain link, rusted, padlocked. The key in my satchel, tagged "Ashore," fit perfectly, and the gate shrieked as it opened. I slipped through and relocked it behind me, then picked my way across the broken slate steps to the lighthouse door. The metal key pressed cold against the iron lock. I turned it. The door groaned inward. Inside, the stairwell spiraled upward like a spine threaded through darkness. My phone's flashlight carved a narrow cone of visibility. The air smelled of mildew and brine, yet beneath those scents lingered lavender and sandalwood, Grandpa's cologne. My throat tightened. Halfway up, a plank creaked ominously. I paused, steadying my breathing. Shadows flickered. I couldn't shake the feeling someone else had come here first. When I reached the lantern room, I found not emptiness, but a desk. A newer one, metal, anchored to the floor with bolts. On it sat a tablet displaying a login screen for Ashby Maritime Holdings Offshore. A sticky note plastered beside the screen read, "Rowan, password is your first hope." Grandpa's voice again, echoing through clues. First hope. My mind reeled backward. Childhood memory surfacing of Grandpa teaching me to sail. I had been frightened of deep water until he handed me the helm and said, "Hope is the wind you make." My first hope was that I wouldn't crash the boat. I'd named that dinghy Windrow. Could that be it? I typed WINDROW. The tablet unlocked to a dashboard showing account balances so staggering I gasped. $50 million, exactly the sum whispered at the luncheon, sat in an account marked Provisional Disbursement. But under Beneficiary was only one name, Rowan Ashby. My knees nearly buckled. Grandpa had left it all to me. A notification icon flashed. I tapped it. An email drafted by Grandpa but scheduled to send tomorrow to all shareholders read, "To my dear family, the inheritance you sought resides in the one who valued hope above entitlement." A PDF attachment labeled Revised Will waited below the message. Tears blurred the screen, but elation gave way to dread. If the family discovered this before I could secure legal counsel, they'd bury me in litigation. Or worse, my cousins weren't above bending laws. Thunder rolled. Wind lashed through broken panes, extinguishing my courage for a heartbeat. I forced a shaky breath. The ring's weight in my pocket grounded me. Suddenly, the lighthouse door slammed below, 2 floors down. Footsteps echoed on the stairs. I spun, scanning for exit. The only path was those same stairs, or the maintenance ladder bolted on the tower's exterior down to the rocks 30 feet below, now slick with rain. Another footstep closer. "Rowan!" Abigail's voice rang upward, taut with fury. "We know you're here," Gail called. "Reading's in 10 minutes. You'd better pray you've nothing to hide." My heart hammered. The tablet screen reflected my wild eyes. Lightning forked outside, illuminating the ladder hatch. I shoved the tablet into my satchel, swung the hatch open, and clambered onto the ladder as the lantern room door flew wide and Abigail's silhouette lunged in. Rain sheeted across the iron rungs, wind clawing at my coat. I eased down, each step a battle against slick metal. "She's got something!" Mason shouted from above. "Get it!" I heard their scramble onto the ladder. Panicked, I accelerated, descending faster until my boots slipped. And the night tilted. My fingers tore at empty air, scraping rust, failing. I fell, weightless, a split second before gravity reclaimed me, and the churning black sea rose like an open mouth, closing over me with a roar of icy silence. Table. The single syllable echoed through Grandpa's library like a gavel striking, snapping the air taut around me. For a heartbeat, I stared at the oak desk where the word had lodged itself, as if my mouth and the grain had conspired to declare an agenda neither fully understood. But there was no time to puzzle over strange beginnings. The last of the late summer sun was draining through diamond pane windows, and at any moment my relatives would stream back inside, faces shiny with rosé and entitlement, ready to strip the room of anything they could claim was sentimental. If Part 4 had ended with my hands trembling over the hidden journal, Part 5 began with resolve soldering my spine. Grandpa's scrawl covered the cracked leather notebook in looping blue ink, each sentence dated meticulously, each entry signed with the flourish he used for business contracts. The earliest page was from 16 months ago, the latest from only 3 weeks before his heart attack. He must have known time was thinning. The content made that clear. "Rowan will not be bullied," one early line read. "The fortune is hers to wield if, and only if, she chooses righteousness." Reading those sentences felt like inhaling cold sea wind, bracing, clarifying, inevitable. Yet righteousness was an elastic concept in a family whose moral compass spun faster than a bargain store weather vane. I flipped another page. My thumb stuck briefly to ink, not fully dry when he closed the book that final time, and caught a second admonition. The others will circle like gulls. Let them scream. Fish guts are their language. My girl must learn thunder. Thunder, I thought, glancing at the cloudy horizon beyond the mullions. I hadn't yet learned thunder. I was still learning to whistle without cracking. Footsteps outside. I slid the ledger beneath my denim jacket, just as Aunt Meredith's laugh pitched high in the hallway. Wine or scheming? Probably both. I eased the study door nearly shut and drifted toward the far wall where shelves rose floor to ceiling, crammed with first editions. Leather spines breathed dust and bergamot. Grandpa's kingdom of words, and now, apparently, mine to defend. The door creaked wider. Cousin Jasper poked his head in, cheeks pink. Tie loosened enough to suggest he'd failed at classy mourning and settled on sloppy celebration. Oh, R.O. I didn't realize you were still in here. His eyes flicked across the shelves, cataloging value. He palmed the knob but didn't step aside. We were about to toast the old man with a vintage Chateau d'Yquem. You should join. I forced a smile. In a bit. I'm just looking for something he wanted me to find. That got his attention. Something? Like? The hunting instinct glimmered. I pictured Jasper as a child, yanking wings off butterflies. He hadn't changed. Money was the wings, and he meant to keep them grounded. Just letters, I lied. Nothing you'd be interested in. He entered fully, closing us in the dim amber glow. Letters can be valuable. Sentimental, of course, he gestured lazily. Need help? Quote, I'm fine. The journal's weight burned beneath my jacket like contraband. I'll join in a few. A beat of silence, then his grin cooled. Don't be long, he warned gently. The probate attorney arrives tomorrow. Wouldn't want you slowed down by nostalgia. I nodded to dismiss him. He left. I exhaled slowly, then locked the door. By moonrise, I was seated cross-legged on the Persian rug, journal open, flashlight balanced between shoeboxes of brittle photographs. Grandpa's entries formed a breadcrumb trail through a forest of corporate intrigue, charitable trusts, and, most importantly, a new will. The revised testament was not in the safe. Jasper likely checked, but Grandpa hinted at a vault of an older kind, stone, not steel. He'd written a riddle. Ask the fountain what it keeps at midnight. Like any good drunk, it will confess. The estate centerpiece was a marble fountain shaped like Poseidon's chariot, installed generations ago by some seafaring Ashby ancestor longing for old-world grandeur. Midnight was an hour away. I snapped the book shut, slid it into my tote, and killed the flashlight. My reflection in the window startled me. Unwashed curls, eyes ringed with flight fatigue, mouth set like I'd bitten iron. Thunder, Grandpa had said. Maybe tonight the lessons began. Midnight smelled of wet grass and distant lilacs. The mansion's garden sat hush-lit by pathway lanterns, their glow barely reaching the fountain's cracked marble basin. Water trickled from Poseidon's trident into a pool littered with autumn leaves. Summer was dying early this year. I knelt, pressed my hand to the fountain's rim. Cold seared my palm. What do you keep? I whispered. Nothing answered but water-slapping stone. I thought of Grandpa's hint. Like any good drunk, it will confess. Liquor. Had he hidden something in one of the wine barrels? No. Ask the fountain. Perhaps the mechanism was internal. I felt below the lip until my fingers brushed a metal latch slick with algae. I pushed. A panel on the basin's pedestal swung outward, revealing a hollow cavity. Inside, a titanium tube lay sealed with a biometric lock, a thumbprint sensor and numeric keypad. Thunder rumbled far away. My thumb was damp from the fountain, but I pressed it anyway. A red light blinked, unrecognized. Grandpa hadn't left his print. He'd left mine. Somewhere. I pulled back, flipping through the journal until a note caught my eye. Inheritance begins with identity. The ash of one becomes the root of another. Ash. Ashby. Ashes. Grandpa's ashes. But he'd been cremated and placed in an urn inside the mausoleum, waiting for family consensus on interment. Identity. Fingerprints. Could there be a sample of Grandpa's thumbprint in ash? Unlikely. My heart pounded. Options narrowed. Then I remembered the brass photo frame in the hallway. Grandpa shaking my hand at my university graduation, ink smudging his thumb onto the glass when he signed the boarding card that day. Smudge. Maybe. I sprinted inside, barefoot across terrazzo tiles, chilled like grave slabs. The hall was empty. Laughter had migrated to the veranda. The frame came off the wall easily. I angled it under lamplight. Yes, a faint oily whirl. I peeled off the glass, cut a strip of clear packing tape from a box of moving supplies, pressed it to the print, and lifted a ghost of Grandpa's thumb. Back at the fountain, I wrapped the tape around my own thumb and pressed the sensor. Green light. The keypad beeped, awaiting code. Code. Grandpa's fishing boat registration number? His birthday? The journal again. Reorder of numbers scribbled in margins. 17359. I punched them. The lock hissed open. Inside the cylinder, a single USB drive, a folded parchment sealed with wax, and a slim silver ring I'd never seen him wear. I pocketed the ring and the parchment, slid the drive into my coat, latched the panel, and looked up to see Jasper looming on the path. "Rowan," he drawled, voice syrupy with suspicion. "Playing treasure hunter?" My pulse drummed. "Paying respects," I answered, standing slowly so as not to seem guilty, though guilt dripped off me like fountain spray. He stepped closer, lantern light carved shadows under his cheekbones. Midnight respects? Unorthodox. You know me, always the black sheep. I tucked a stray curl behind my ear. "Why aren't you with the others?" "Someone said they saw a light out here, and you know how Grandpa felt about security." He faked a sigh. "We must protect the estate." His use of "we" burned. "All safe," I said, gesturing at the fountain. "Just water and stone." He studied me. Perhaps my eyes betrayed me, because his lips curled. "Have you been crying, R.O.? You look flushed." "Jet lag." I moved to pass him. He blocked the path. In his hand was a phone. The screen glowed with a call already ringing. "Who are you calling?" "Lawyer," he said lightly. "We have rules about meddling with property." Quote, "Panic threatened to choke me. If the vault's contents were confiscated before I decoded them, the truth about the inheritance might vanish. I needed to stall." "You're drunk," I countered, reaching for his wrist. "Let's not do something we'll regret." Jasper's eyes gleamed, a predator catching wind of wounded prey. "Regret is for paupers. We Ashbys prefer consequences." He pressed dial. I slapped the phone. It skittered across the wet grass. He grabbed my arm. I yelped. His fingers bruised muscle. He leaned close, breath hot with wine. "Whatever you're hiding, it belongs to all of us." I twisted free, stumbling back. My heel caught on a root. I fell, splashing into the fountain's shallow pool. Cold shot up my spine. The USB clattered into the water. Jasper lunged, but I scooped the drive, closed fist around it, and kicked at his shin. He howled. I scrambled out, dripping, adrenaline crashing through my veins. Lanterns failed just then. A blown fuse. Darkness collapsed like velvet. I ran blind toward the service wing, heard Jasper cursing behind me. A door slammed elsewhere. The family's voices rose. Someone had heard the commotion. Inside the pantry, I wiped the USB clean, shoved it into my bra, and slid the journal on top. But I needed a decoy. I grabbed a random bottle of Burgundy and strode back down the corridor, dripping but upright. Aunts, uncles, cousins converged near the foyer like vultures stirred from roost. Jasper limped toward them, shouting that I'd attacked him. "Wine bottle in hand," I called. "Accident. I tripped in the dark. Jasper tried to help." All eyes swung to him. His trousers were damp. He looked deranged. My cousins whispered. Aunt Meredith squinted. "Is that blood on your knee, Jasper?" He stammered. I raised the Burgundy. "I ruined a vintage in the fall. A tragedy we can all mourn together." I forced a laugh. Several relatives chuckled, the kind bred from discomfort, not humor. Mom appeared at the stair landing, silk dressing gown fluttering. Her gaze flicked from Jasper's fury to my soaked clothes. "Bedtime," she ordered softly. Obedient as sleepwalkers, the family dispersed. When the hallway cleared, Mom beckoned. In her suite, she handed me towels. "Whatever happened, you must tread lightly," she whispered. "They smell inheritance like wolves smell blood." I met her eyes, surprised by the allyship in her tone. "Do you?" I asked. She sighed. "I smell regret." Her hand brushed my wet curls. "And pride." She hesitated. "Your grandfather loved puzzles, but be sure you like the picture they form before you finish it." I left her pondering those words. At 2 a.m., I sat cross-legged on my childhood bed, laptop open, USB drive humming. Folders filled the screen. Shell companies, tax filings, charitable grant drafts. But one file blazed. Ashby_Thunder.mp4. A video. I clicked. Grandpa's face filled the frame. Filmed in this very room. Eyes bright, voice gravelly. "Rowan, if you're watching, I'm gone. And if you're alone, they haven't earned the right to stand beside you." Inside the parchment, there's a single sentence, a legal key. "Read it to the attorney before he files probate. The estate will shift on its axis. And those who didn't invite you to say goodbye to me will have to say hello to justice." My throat tightened. I'd pocketed the parchment but hadn't cracked the wax. I reached for it, flickering candlelight dancing over the seal. Midway unrolling it, I remembered the required break for my audience. Grandpa's humor would have loved the showmanship. So I spoke aloud, imagining viewers leaning in. "This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story." I smiled at the absurdity, then focused on the parchment. 7 words in elegant calligraphy. "Contest clause overrides all previous testamentary transfers." I blinked. A contest clause. No contest clause usually barred beneficiaries from challenging a will lest they forfeit their share. But override? Grandpa had engineered an inverse trap. Anyone who tried to dispute the new will would trigger a redistribution, likely funneling assets to a backup beneficiary, me. If the family contested, they'd lose. But first, I had to present the clause before they saw the will, ensuring they walked into Grandpa's tripwire blindfolded. A creak outside the door. I stuffed parchment under pillows, killed the screen. The handle twisted quietly. I slid a hand under the mattress where I'd stashed the journal. Footsteps retreated, someone checking if I slept. I reopened the laptop, copied all USB files to cloud storage. Redundancy was oxygen now, at 3 a.m. I returned the drive to the cylinder, resealed the fountain vault, and jammed a twig into the latch to monitor tampering. Dawn seeped pastel through curtains when I finally collapsed, clothes still damp, heartbeat refusing rest. Tomorrow, or rather today, the attorney would read the will. Thunder was coming. I just hoped I'd learned enough to ride the storm. Lightning cracked somewhere distant, a jagged applause. And in the hallway, Jasper's hushed voice hissed, "Tonight she opens her mouth and we close it for good." My blood iced. The hinges of mourning screeched open. That was when the scream tore through the manor, Aunt Meredith shouting one word that spiraled up the stairwell, "Fire!" I sprang from bed, smoke curling under the door, laptop dead from sudden battery failure, files unsaved. The hallway outside glowed ember red. Relatives burst through the double doors of the study, just as the last streak of sunset bled out behind the poplars, every familiar face distorted by the shadows of greed and desperation. I straightened from behind Grandpa's oak desk, the brittle folder still clenched in my hand, its contents rustling with the kind of power that could topple empires, or at least a dynasty of entitled Ashbys. Aunt Lydia's perfume, jasmine and smug condescension hit me first. Then Uncle Grant's thunderous footsteps, the scuffing panic of Cousin Bryce, the brittle hiss of my mother's disbelief. "We told you not to meddle, Rowan," Mom spat, but her voice quavered. "Put that file down before you regret it." I inhaled slowly, letting the scent of old paper and cedarwood shelves ground me. The letter Grandpa had drafted, dated 3 years before his death, outlined a trust that bypassed everyone in this room. The diagrams of his philanthropy, the stipulations for community projects in Boston's underserved neighborhoods, the clause that named me sole executor if certain moral benchmarks weren't met by the family. It was all there, and the shockwaves were about to crack porcelain smiles into shards. I warned them. Grandpa's voice echoed in my memory from a phone call the winter he'd found a tumor and decided that if mortality was inevitable, at least integrity could be immortal. Lydia lunged first, manicured nails flashing like talons. I stepped sideways, letting her momentum stumble into the chair I'd vacated. The leather groaned beneath her designer suit. Grant swore, reaching for the folder. But Bryce, a former high school linebacker turned mid-level hedge fund analyst, blocked his father with a nervous arm. The younger cousins watched from the corridor, wide-eyed, phones raised to capture the implosion on video, Ashby history recorded as pure scandal bait. I lifted the folder higher. Grandpa believed in second chances, I said, my voice steady even though my pulse drummed like storm hail. But he believed in accountability more. Grant's laugh cracked. Accountability? From you? The vagabond granddaughter who couldn't even keep a 9-to-5? He admired that I tried for something honest. I opened the cover. Thin pages whispered, unlike laundering art through shell charities in Zurich, or leveraged buyouts that leave entire communities jobless. Their indignation drained color from the room. Shouts overlapped, lies, slander, sabotage, until Lydia slammed a fist on the desk. None of this will stand in court. The will we filed, signed, witnessed, names the estate equally ours. That will's validity hinges on Grandpa's state of mind last spring. I tapped the psychiatric assessment tucked behind the trust documents, notarized and time-stamped weeks after times the version they'd paraded. Turns out he'd consulted his doctor, who certified he was lucid when he updated the trust that supersedes everything else. Mom's face crumpled. Rowan, please. We're family. Family invited me to a funeral, I shot back, but only because they wanted my signature on a consent form. The room went glass still. At the doorway, a new silhouette appeared. Arthur Gleason, the executor, briefcase in hand. Traffic rumpled, tie askew. His gaze swept the chaos, landed on me, and the folder, before softening into the ghost of a smile. He'd warned me earlier. They'll come for you before they come for the truth. I apologize for the delay, he announced. Shall we convene for the official reading? Grant squared his shoulders. That won't be necessary. We already have the paperwork. Yes, Arthur interrupted mildly. About that, Mr. Ashby signed a codicil rescinding the earlier distribution. He extended a palm toward me. Ms. Rowan, if you would. I relinquished the folder, shaking only after it left my grip. Arthur slipped on reading glasses. The room's hush became suffocating. Outside, a gust rattled the windows like a warning drum. Arthur began to read. I braced myself not for victory, but for the backlash. The figures were staggering. $50 million structured into initiatives, outer city youth tech hubs, scholarship funds, microloans for women-owned startups, and a residual remainder placed in a stewardship account under my oversight. The Ashby successors received conditional payouts contingent upon demonstrable volunteerism and transparent financial ethics. Violations voided their shares. Every sentence chiseled new fissures into my relative's composure. Lydia's hand flew to her throat. Grant's forehead beaded sweat. Bryce muttered an oath that broke halfway out. Mom's stare speared me like a dying star. Arthur closed the document. Silence clung like winter frost. I will contest, Lydia whispered. You're free to try, Arthur said, collected as snow, but Mr. Ashby's legal counsel anticipated challenges. There's video testimony, medical certification, and Ms. Rowan retains control of evidence. He gestured gently to me. Suddenly, the center of gravity shifted. Rage swung my family toward me in unison, a pack instinct baring teeth. I stepped back until the desk pressed into my spine. Grant advanced. Hand over that flash drive. I gripped it tighter. Court order first. He raised a fist. Bryce grabbed his arm, tension spiderwebbing down his cousin's sleeve. Dad, don't! A crash cut through the standoff as Lydia swept books off a shelf, pages scattering like terrified birds. We built this empire, she cried. You don't get to dismantle it with Grandpa's sentimental guilt trip. Arthur tried to intercede, but the siblings spiraled. Accusations clawed the ceiling, years of nepotism and resentment erupted into open warfare. I edged along the wall toward the corridor, scanning for an escape. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. I thumbed it open. Look out the window. My breath hitched. The message was unsigned. I glanced toward the study's bay window. Beyond the glass, the drive was choked with press vans, lenses gleaming like predator eyes. Someone had leaked. Perhaps one of the cousins, perhaps a disgruntled housekeeper. Within minutes, this private implosion would blister across every business wire in the country. Panic snapped my attention back inside. Lydia's footfalls pounded toward me as she hefted a bronze globe, her intent unmistakable. I ducked, the globe slamming against the doorframe, splintering wood. She cursed, swinging again. Stop! Mom shrieked, but her plea dried on her lips when journalists began pounding at the front doors downstairs. My heartbeat drowned everything. I bolted into the corridor, tripping over the spilled pages of first editions. The mansion suddenly felt labyrinthine, corridors twisting like intestines. Cameras flashed through the foyer sidelights, paparazzi serpents tasting headlines. Where was safe? Grandpa's greenhouse on the east wing? The boathouse by the pond? None held the evidence. Grandpa I held it. The drive burning in my pocket. I needed allies. I thought of Detective Sloan, the childhood friend turned local officer who'd texted condolences earlier, promising discreet support. She was off duty tonight, but had contacts. If I could reach her. I darted down the servants' staircase, the world roaring like a captive storm above me. Sudden footfalls echoed behind. Grant was giving chase, his fury a locomotive rumble. The stairs spiraled, each turn narrower than the last, and my legs screamed from adrenaline. Below, the kitchen's terracotta floor gleamed under industrial pendants. I burst through the swinging door, skidded past an island stacked with catering platters. Shrimp skewers jettisoned into the air, and crashed through the pantry toward the mudroom exit. Cold night slapped my face as I spilled onto the gravel courtyard. Motion sensors blazed, illuminating dust motes like snow. Outside voices surged, reporters converging, shouting questions. Their lights blinded me. Shutters clicked. I hesitated, and Grant barreled out behind me, grabbing my jacket. Fabric tore. I lunged forward, losing balance. The flash drive slipped from my grip, skittering under a parked catering van. I dove, scraping knees, scraping palms, just as Grant lunged too. Tires squealed, the driver attempting to pull away from the fray, crushing gravel. The wheel rolled closer to the tiny silver rectangle, glinting in the light. I stretched fingertips, heartsick. Grant's hand clamped my ankle, and the van lurched forward. Rubber met plastic with a crunch that echoed like a verdict. The flash drive shattered beneath the tire. My scream fused with Grant's triumphant roar and the reporter's strobing chaos. And in that cataclysmic instant, I realized the only copy of Grandpa's testimony might have just been destroyed. But even as despair swallowed me, the van's brake lights flared, and a shadowed figure stepped out, holding another drive between gloved fingers, eyes meeting mine with quiet fire. Detective Sloan. Rowan, she said, her voice slicing through the bedlam. Get in the car. Now. Grant wheeled, recognition dawning too late. I sprinted, my world narrowing to the police cruiser, idling by the gate, its doors open like salvation. Sloan gunned the engine. Grant's howl chased me down the drive, but the cruiser's tires bit the asphalt. And the estate vanished behind us, swallowed by red-blue whirls of night and the volcano of flashbulbs. The fight for Grandpa's legacy had just detonated in public view, and everything I thought was secure was now ash in the wind. Sloane's words were a low oath. They'll try to paint you the villain, Rowan. We need a strategy. Fast. I clutched the second drive to my chest, adrenaline drowning grief. Then let's start by telling the world the truth, I whispered. But the cruiser suddenly skidded, headlights washing over an unexpected barricade on the private road. 3 black SUVs idled nose to nose, their windows tinted opaque. Sloane's hand went to her sidearm. "Hang on." My pulse vaulted, breath caged. Because the Ashby War hadn't ended at the gate, it was only beginning. Ion hung in the dusty air like an unshed storm, thick with an anxiety so electric it prickled across my skin. I tightened my grip on Grandpa's folder, feeling its worn cardboard edges dig crescents into my palms, and raised my chin to meet the wave of Ashbys flooding the study. They fanned out instinctively, Aunt Lydia at the vanguard, her eyes like sharpened glass, Uncle Graham shifting his weight as if preparing for a rugby scrum, my cousins forming a loose semicircle behind them, the way gossip's foot soldiers arrange themselves before a siege. Somewhere near the back, my younger brother Clark hovered with a frown of reluctant curiosity, caught between the family's orbit and whatever memories of childhood camaraderie still tethered him to me. Every heartbeat seemed to echo in the wood-paneled walls, carrying the unspoken question, what power did Rowan bring to this room that we did not? I drew in a steady breath, letting the ponderous smell of cedar and old books anchor me. My voice, when I found it, was low but unwavering. Grandpa's last wishes were not simply sentimental, I said. They were strategic. And if any of you had bothered to read the letters he left, you'd understand why your exclusion was deserved. Aunt Lydia's jaw flexed. You're 32 and penniless. Why should we believe you over the executor or the board of trustees? I opened the folder. Inside lay the series of notarized addenda I had discovered, signed less than 2 months before Grandpa's passing, detailing a trust structure that favored community foundations, environmental initiatives, and, astonishingly, a single contingent beneficiary, me. But the gift came with a clause. If we're going to talk about belief, I replied, let's reference the facts. I lifted the top document, crisp under the desk lamp. Grandpa entrusted me to carry out an investment plan, creating sustainable jobs in 3 coastal towns he loved. He made that contingent on me personally evaluating every project for 10 consecutive years. If I refused, the entire fund would default to a consortium of charities. Not to any of you. Uncle Graham blinked. That's absurd. He adored family. Family that showed up, I said softly. Family that didn't leave him alone on Christmas after his stroke, or avoid his calls because they were, quote, busy skiing in Vail. A hush swept the study, as fragile as a spiderweb across a doorway. I laid out the documents, each signature glowing with the finality of ink and intention. Then I paused, turning over the last page. A handwritten letter addressed simply to Little R. The pages smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and rain. Their eyes followed the paper like feral cats tracking a songbird. I cleared my throat. He wrote this the night I told him about my failed startup, about how I thought I'd disappointed the family legacy. He said legacy isn't about fortunes preserved in amber, but about how courage multiplies when shared. I began to read. My dearest Rowan, if courage were currency, you would be wealthier than all the Ashbys combined. I have seen you lose 5 times and rise 6, every defeat forging something rarer than unspent gold. That is why I leave the stewardship of my fortune to you, not because you need it, but because you will not be owned by it. A tremor ran through my voice, but I steadied. He writes that he forgave them for their distance, but knew they would not forgive me for inheriting what they avoided. Someone inhaled sharply. Cousin Isla, maybe, yet no one spoke. They were mesmerized, even Aunt Lydia. I folded the letter shut. This isn't about disinheriting you. It's about what you chose long before he drafted these papers. You disinherited yourselves the moment you treated Grandpa's life as an obstacle course toward a payout. Graham's face reddened. We have lawyers. You think this won't be contested? Quote, contest all you wish, I answered. But every hour you spend fighting drains the trust by design. Legal costs come out of future distributions. By the time you're done, there may be nothing left to quarrel over. Silence. I held their gaze. Or you can help. Grandpa built a framework, but it needs fresh ideas. Coastal clean energy farms, microfinance for local artisans, restoration of maritime heritage sites. projects that can revive towns instead of emptying them. I want your hands and minds, not your greed. Amid the standoff, a faint chime sounded, the estate executor's car pulling into the gravel drive. Lydia's shoulders sagged. She knew the game was nearly over. Uncle Graham rubbed the bridge of his nose, defeat or reflection warring in his posture. Behind them, Clark's expression softened. But the momentary détente shattered when Lydia hissed, "You'll regret humiliating us." She surged forward, perhaps to snatch the documents, perhaps just to reclaim some vestige of power. My pulse thundered. Instinct guided me. I reached into the folder and produced the final envelope Grandpa had marked to be opened when the wolves bare their teeth. I tore the seal. Inside lay a single USB drive and a terse note. "Play this for them. Truth has a sound more piercing than greed." Lydia paused mid-step. The room leaned in. I crossed to the antique phonograph that Grandpa had retrofitted with modern speakers, slotted the drive into the hidden port, and pressed play. A grainy recording crackled to life. Grandpa's voice, unmistakable, steady as tide. "If you're hearing this, my darlings, you're likely squabbling. I won't scold you. The dead have little leverage. But I will remind you that I built a fortune on cooperation, not conquest." He paused, a rustle suggesting he'd shifted in his chair. "The world is burning, quite literally. If you spend your days clawing at coins, the best you'll build is a bigger vault. Rowan knows this. She's seen failure and still believes in rebuilding. Follow her, and you might find more than money." The recording ended with a soft chuckle, then silence. Tears threatened my eyes, but I blinked them back. I faced my family. Uncle Graham exhaled, shoulders slumping as if the fight had leaked from him. "What do you need from us?" My breath caught. For the first time, the question felt genuine. I spoke carefully. Transparency, commitment, a willingness to start where Grandpa left off, funding resilience. I gestured to a ledger on the desk. "First up, we vote tonight on the Hartley Harbor title project. Groundbreaking is in 8 weeks." Aunt Lydia's lips pinched, but she nodded once. Even small concessions can be tectonic shifts. One by one, my relatives took seats around the study's massive conference table. Each chair groaned under unspoken history, but also, perhaps, a tentative hope. I handed out photocopies of feasibility studies. We debated, argued, recalibrated. And when the grandfather clock chimed midnight, the vote was unanimous. Exhaustion mingled with exhilaration. I gathered the signed minutes into Grandpa's folder, now ours, and stepped onto the veranda. Night wind brushed my cheeks. Somewhere beyond the tree line, the Atlantic murmured its ancient lullaby. I realized then that the empire Grandpa had left me wasn't measured in millions, but in moments like this, when old wounds might just scab into wisdom because someone dared to believe in a better story. Behind me, the study lights glowed as my family discussed logistics late into the dark. For once, their voices sounded less like wolves and more like gardeners planning a green rebirth. I whispered into the night, "Thank you, Grandpa. I'll spend my life earning this." The breeze shifted, carrying salt and possibility, and the faintest echo of his laugh. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.